frostbite fingers, if I recall. Let's see. You bend them?
Sure enough.
They're not black and blue anymore.
Dr. Bell! Dr. Bell! Dr. Bell! You're not gonna believe this! Dr. Bell! Dr. Bell! Dr. Bell, you're not gonna believe this! Captain Forrest brought a blindfolded Yankee to camp.
Yeah, you're right. I don't believe it. Well, yeah, that's Bill. Yeah, he was.
While out on patrol, Captain Bill Forrest, which is the colonel's brother, got to chasing after some Yankee cavalry, and a poor old reporter who was riding with him got separated and captured by Bill.
So what's your name, fella?
My name's Albert D. Richardson. I work for the New York Tribune.
My name's Dr. Finus Bell. As soon as I get you back to my tent, we'll get that mask off of you. We'll find out how in the world you made it here to Tennessee.
While on his way to Savannah, Tennessee to see General Grant, Mr. Richardson had gotten himself separated from his cavalry escort. And I just think for his amusement that old Bill Forrest, he wanted to see me and Mr. Richardson lock horns. And when I found out he had been at Fort Donelson to write a story for his abolitionist newspaper, I knew a confrontation was inevitable.
Off of you. Take your seat right over there. Albert D. Richardson. Are you the same Albert Richardson that wrote about Pike's Peak?
Well, yes. Yes, I'm one and the same. Did you read my story?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, it's a great story. So good it makes a person just want to go out and see what Pike's Peak's all about. But you know, Mr. Richardson, there's no Pike's Peak in Tennessee. So what brings you here?
Well, my employer is Horace Greeley. Are you familiar with him?
Well, I'm very familiar with Horace Greeley.
Well, he sent me down here to write about the heroics of General Grant.
Well, sir, you do understand that your employer, Horace Greeley, and some of his friends that are northern publishers of newspapers, they're the cause of this war.
And how do you explain that opinion?
That's no opinion, sir. That's a fact. Ever since Uncle Tom's Cabin was published, abolitionists, all they want to do is bash the South. And northern newspapers, they want to paint a picture that all Southerners own slaves. And that ain't a fact at all.
Well, most Southerners own slaves, don't they?
According to the 1859 United States Census, less than 15% of the Southern population owns slaves. Mr. Richardson, that poses quite the question to me. What's the other 85% fighting for?
Well, I don't know. Maybe the hatred of the Negro.
Sir, you have no idea. You know nothing about the South, do you?
Sir, I know that slavery is wrong, and I know that treating human beings like cattle is disgusting.
Well, let me tell you a story. When me and my wife, Sarah Grace, first got married, we freed 8 slaves. They were slaves that she had inherited from her deceased parents. But neither one of us approved of slavery. Matter of fact, we both despised it. But I will tell you, Sarah Grace, one of her best friends to this very day, was one of those slaves. They grew up together. They played together as girls. The lady's name is Abigail. And she's a seamstress by trade. She now lives about a mile from our house. And I can guarantee you, matter of fact, I'll bet you a Yankee dime, Sarah Grace is probably at Abigail's house this very day being fitted for a new dress. Sarah Grace, she does love those dresses.
But I've seen pictures of beatings, and I've read stories about the mistreatment of slaves. What about those?
Well, as a doctor, I've seen my share of mistreated slaves. But to be quite honest with you, most are treated very well, and I should know, because I doctor the slave and I doctor the master both. Now, if you find a mistreated slave, most of the time you're going to find a master that abuses not only his slave, but his wife, his children, his horse, and his dog. I'm not defending slavery. I don't like it at all. I'm just telling you like it is.
Many abolitionists expect the Negroes to rise up, kill their masters, and join the Union Army. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm sure there's a few who might, but most of the slaves I know, they're keeping the farm going while their masters are off to war. And there are several hundred in this very army.
Now, my good doctor, you don't expect me to believe for 1 minute that a black man would be a part of the Confederate Army, at least not by his own free will.
You know, for a man of such great renown, you sure are a poor ignorant soul. In the Confederate Army, there are men of every color, serving in every capacity. It's not just a white man's war. There are many faces of war.
And you expect me to believe that the black man is ready to take up arms against the United States?
Mr. Richardson, get your hat. It's time for you to meet some good old Confederates. Mr. Richardson, I'd like to introduce you to the many faces of war.
Who are all these people? They don't look a thing like they're supposed to look like.
I thought you told me you was at Fort Donelson. These faces, they don't look any different than the men that was captured at Fort Donelson.
Well, I was at Fort Donelson, but I guess General Grant only allowed me to see what he wanted me to see.
Sometimes we only see what we want to see. The gentleman on the end there, that's Dr. Cowan. He's the fella I work with. The man next to him, that's the only slave owner here. It's Mr. Riley. And the fella next to him, that's his slave Jim.
Looks like Jim's being a good slave, cleaning his master's gun.
That's Jim's gun. He's quite the shot, too. It's what you Yanks call a sharpshooter. Matter of fact, at Fort Donelson, he took out 10 bluebellies.
Well, now I've seen it all. A Negro with a gun in the South goes against everything I've ever been told.
And the man standing behind him, that's a freed black man, fighting of his own free will. I hear tell he's got kinfolk in Louisiana that are black and they own slaves. The fella doing whittling there, it's Mr. Brown, Jonathan Brown. His dad was a Cherokee and his mama was a Choctaw. The lady sitting down there, it's Miss Johnson. She came up to Fort Donelson to see her brother. They're both orphans. He got killed there. So now she's our nurse. Works with me and Doc Cowan in the hospital tent. If you go over to the Texas Cavalry Camp, you're going to find some Hispanics. You're even going to find an Oriental that rides with them. He come to Texas to work on the railroad. Now he's a Confederate. Mr. Richardson, this is the many faces of war I was telling you about. Why don't you go have a seat over there and you just might learn something.
I believe I will. This could be very enlightening.
Mr. Richardson, just do me a favor.
What's that?
Don't preach to him like you preached to me in the tent. Mr. Brown over there, he ain't skint no Yankee today.
I'll keep that in mind.
Sir. Have a seat.
Thank you.